It was a dark and stormy night when Mark and Emily decided to explore the old mansion at the edge of town. Locals called it the House of Djinns, whispering tales of strange occurrences and eerie noises. Intrigued by these stories, the couple, both avid paranormal enthusiasts, were determined to uncover the truth. As they approached the decrepit building, the wind howled through the broken windows, and the trees around the mansion seemed to groan with age. Mark pushed open the creaky door, and they stepped inside, their flashlights casting eerie shadows on the walls. The air was thick with dust, and the scent of mildew was overwhelming. Each step they took echoed through the empty halls, amplifying their unease. They passed through room after room, each one more dilapidated than the last, until they reached a large, grand staircase leading to the upper floors. Without a word, they began their ascent, their footsteps heavy on the ancient wood. Halfway up, they heard a soft, whispering voice. Emily froze, clutching Mark's arm. "Did you hear that?" she whispered. Mark nodded, his face pale. They listened, straining to make out the words, but the voice was too faint. They continued up the stairs, the whispers growing louder and more distinct. As they reached the top, they could clearly hear the voice repeating a phrase in an unfamiliar language. Mark, who had a keen interest in ancient languages, recognized it as Arabic. "It's saying leave this place, over and over," he whispered. A cold chill ran down Emily's spine. "We should go," she urged, but Mark was determined to find the source of the voice. They followed the sound down a long corridor to a door at the end. With a deep breath, Mark turned the handle and pushed the door open. Inside was a dimly lit room with a large, ornate mirror on one wall. The voice was now deafening, echoing around them. As they stepped closer to the mirror, the surface began to ripple, and a shadowy figure appeared within it. The figure's eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and it reached out a hand towards them. Mark and Emily backed away, but the door slammed shut behind them. The room grew colder, and the figure emerged from the mirror, its form becoming more solid. It was a djinn, a creature of legend, with an aura of malevolence. "You should not have come here," it hissed. "This place is cursed. Leave now, or suffer the consequences." Terrified, Mark and Emily tried to open the door, but it wouldn't budge. The djinn advanced, its eyes glowing brighter. In a panic, Mark remembered the stories of how djinns could be repelled by certain ancient symbols. He fumbled in his backpack, pulling out a small amulet inscribed with protective symbols. Holding it up, he shouted a prayer he had memorized. The djinn recoiled, hissing in anger, and the temperature in the room began to rise. The amulet's glow intensified, and with a final, ear-piercing shriek, the djinn vanished in a burst of light. The door flew open, and Mark and Emily stumbled out, gasping for breath. They didn't stop running until they were far from the mansion, their hearts pounding with fear and relief. From that day on, they never spoke of what happened in the House of Djinns. But the stories persisted, and the mansion remained abandoned, a dark silhouette against the sky, forever haunted by the spirits within. Years passed, and the legend of the House of Djinns grew even more sinister. Locals spoke in hushed tones about the mysterious couple who had ventured inside and emerged forever changed. Mark and Emily had moved to a different town, trying to leave their ordeal behind, but the memories lingered like a shadow. One day, Emily received a letter in the mail. It was from an old friend, Sarah, who was researching paranormal phenomena. Sarah had heard the rumors and wanted to know the truth about the House of Djinns. Despite Emily's initial reluctance, she agreed to meet and share their story, hoping it might finally bring some closure. They met at a small cafe, and Emily recounted their terrifying experience. Sarah listened intently, her eyes wide with fascination. "Emily, I need to go there," she said. "I need to see it for myself." Emily tried to dissuade her, but Sarah was determined. She convinced Emily to join her, arguing that her first-hand knowledge could be invaluable. Reluctantly, Emily agreed, on the condition that they take every possible precaution. A week later, they stood once again at the gates of the mansion. The air was thick with foreboding, and Emily's hands trembled as she fumbled with the keys to the lock they had installed on their last visit to prevent anyone else from entering. Inside, the house was just as they had left it, but an oppressive silence hung in the air. They moved cautiously, Sarah documenting everything with her camera. As they made their way up the grand staircase, the familiar whispers began to echo around them. This time, Emily was prepared. She pulled out a small vial of holy water and sprinkled it in the direction of the voices. The whispers ceased, and a cold wind swept through the corridor, as if the house itself was reacting to their presence. In the room with the mirror, they found it covered with a heavy cloth. Sarah approached it cautiously, pulling the cloth aside. The mirror's surface was smooth and still, but Emily felt a shiver of dread. "Be careful," she warned. Sarah nodded, her focus unwavering. She placed a series of protective symbols around the mirror, hoping to contain whatever malevolent force resided within. They waited, tense and silent. Hours passed, and just as they began to think the danger had passed, the mirror's surface rippled again. The djinn's figure appeared, but this time, it seemed weaker, its form flickering. "You dare return?" it hissed. Sarah stood her ground, holding up a talisman she had brought for protection. "We seek to end your torment," she said firmly. The djinn's eyes glowed with a mix of anger and desperation. "My torment will end when the curse is lifted," it said. "Free me, and this place will be at peace." Emily and Sarah exchanged a look. "How can we lift the curse?" Sarah asked. The djinn's gaze softened slightly. "Find the amulet that binds me. It lies hidden in this house, in a place where shadows meet light." Determined to end the curse, they began their search, moving from room to room. In the attic, where sunlight streamed through broken windows, casting long shadows, they found a hidden compartment. Inside was an ancient amulet, covered in dust. As Emily picked it up, the house seemed to groan, and the temperature plummeted. They hurried back to the mirror. "We found it," Emily said, holding up the amulet. The djinn's eyes flickered with hope. "Break it," it whispered. With a deep breath, Sarah smashed the amulet against the floor. A blinding light filled the room, and the djinn let out a final, piercing scream before vanishing. The house fell silent. The oppressive feeling lifted, replaced by a sense of calm. Emily and Sarah hurried out, relieved to leave the cursed place behind. From that day on, the mansion stood empty but peaceful, its dark history fading into legend. And though Emily and Sarah never returned, they knew they had finally brought an end to the haunting of the House of Djinns.